Okay. Missing the truth again, global boiling. Let's go into prayer first and I'll explain that. Holy God, again, we thank you for the time that you've given us here. Thank you for all your care for us. And thank you for providing for all the, combating all the fear that's out there for everything that Satan wants us to be afraid of. We just thank you for this time. We ask that you bless this time that we have together. In his name we pray. Amen. Okay, I talked to Darren on Thursday. The plan was that I'm going to be teaching the class in a couple of weeks on, I got a bit of a ring. Is that, I have an echo in my ear. Maybe it's all in my head. Okay. When I talked to Pastor Darren on Thursday, he wasn't sure what he would have for tonight because he's got family in town, and I know what that's like. And then I'd forgotten that I had family coming up too, but they all got sick. So at any rate, but I'm working on a class about the temples, the 4 temples of the Jews, and the history of that, and I will touch that a little bit. But backing up a little bit, this whole lesson is squirrels, really. It's a deviation. It's, oh, what is that? How can I do that? There is, I don't know how many of you are familiar. I think, I know Brendan is. Okay, wake up. Maybe I have to do the other one. There we go. Okay, STOA is a homeschool debate organization. And it's been around for a few years. It's a national organization. I don't know that they're international. They may have some of that. When they first started, Brendan was in one of the first groups way back when, and they're still going. But they do debate with homeschoolers they have Lincoln Douglas debate, they have policy debate. But I was intrigued with the topic here of what it is this time. Resolved, and that looks horrible. The rest of the slides are not like that, so that's good. But resolved, the United States federal government should substantially reform its energy policy. And I am no expert, but energy is kind of my hobby, if you will. I'm just intrigued with all that stuff. Let me give you a little bit of background of STOA first before we get into this, because this is where I started grabbing stuff and I said, oh, I'm going to be one of the judges. I volunteer periodically to be one of their judges for their debates, one of the community judges. I think Kathy Dugan's done that. I know Brendan's done that. Where we go in with a team, and as they debate, we judge them on their speech capability, on how well they've done with the debate. How many of you have ever done debate before? I never did. My brother-in-law did. Of course, Brenda did. But I never had the opportunity. I would have been terrified to do it, standing in front of people like I am right now. Well, I'm okay with it right now, but back then I would have been terrified. But as a community judge, I get to see how these young people are doing that, what they do, and as you can see in this slide, the rounds last about 75 minutes as the 2 teams talk out the issues. So I'm anxious to see what they have to say, because the affirmative, should we change this position and move change our government's position on energy policy, I think can be easily defended. The other side I don't think can, but they will do their best to do that, and I'm anxious to see how they do that. Okay? So first of all, let me explain what STOA is, because that's the name of the homeschool organization. A STOA is like a hallway. It's an open-air hallway with colonnades on both sides. But it's where the Greeks used to meet to discuss things. And that's what they've picked for this name, is to debate and discuss things. And in fact, make sure this thing works now. Yeah. This is a photograph of Herod's temple. Okay, you know it's not. It's not a photograph, because we have no idea what it looked like. Have ideas, I mean, we have ideas, but we can't say for sure what it looked like. But it had a stoa where people could discuss things, and it may have been where Jesus did some of the teaching. Okay? But the topic that these kids will be talking about is dealing with energy. And why is energy important right now? Because global boiling. Maybe you saw these articles in the summer. You can do a search on it. They're worried that the planet is getting too hot and we've reached a tipping point. And they say, well, the whole planet hasn't reached 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is about 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, higher than normal. What is normal? What is the best temperature for us? We have no idea. But they're in a big panic because they say, well, yes, the whole Earth hasn't reached that, but a lot of places have. So we need to start panicking now. And so you see these articles. I just did a quick search, and then one right after the other has these articles about global boiling. So what's the, well, United Nations. Hottest July ever signals era of global boiling has arrived, says UN. So fear and panic. In fact, some are so afraid that they're afraid the aliens may come and destroy us because of our civilization's tendency for climate change. Okay, but where's some of that stuff coming from? Humanity is threatened by global boiling. I like this cartoon because it kind of says, you know, follow the money. Here we go again. I'll settle the science for you. Or this one I really like. Looks like Marge just had her baby. That's so bad for the climate. What gender was it assigned? You go, oh boy. Fear abounds. The woke religions of gender bending and climate worship threaten the very fabric of this nation. Then we have California suing big oil for causing climate change. I also saw, I think it's what, New York is suing Kia because their cars are easy to steal. And go, where's that come from? Your focus is all on the wrong things. Well, you've seen this meme before, and I like this. Politics comes from poly meaning many, and ticks meaning blood-sucking bugs. Okay? All right, enough with the joking. Let's talk about the real stuff. Actual science of government. Okay? Here, we have President Biden speaking before the United Nations here. This was last week or the week before, I can't remember. But in his 4-minute speech, he said 16 times, or he talked about climate 16 times. This year has also brought widespread death and devastation from the borderless climate crisis. That's his words. And you all know it and feel it. Represent what the Secretary General has rightly called the code red for humanity. Time to panic. So what's he do now? President Biden says climate crisis is undeniable after Hurricane Idalia damage. And it also says right here, impact after Maui wildfire and Hurricane Idalia. Those are reasons to suspect climate change as being the cause of these problems. And when you really take a look at it, in Hawaii, the problem was a lot of the land which had been farmed before for sugarcane and was maintained was turned over to the government and left fallow, and it had grasses growing all over the place, and nobody was taking care of it. It wasn't being watered, and it was super dry, and it was one thing after another that led to a huge disaster. Okay? Well, on the White House website, you can take a look at the fact sheet that President Biden has signed his executive orders for what he's trying to do here is set what the government's policies are going to be for the future. It's maybe not the world, but you know, government, as he says here in this, let's see if I can do this right. Net zero. Everything looks like net zero. And what's net zero means? It means we no more carbon footprint. We're going to use energy but not produce carbon. So how do you do that? Well, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay, he's going to take swift action. We'll skip this one. But one of the things he's done, he's established the American Climate Corps. And Congress did not create this group, and it's patterned after what Franklin Delano Roosevelt set up back during when he was president, but he didn't establish it. It was Congress that did that. The president has no authority to fund this thing, so how do they do that? But they're going to get 20,000 young people to fix the climate somehow, not sure. And then he goes after oil. He shut down future oil and gas activity on thousands of acres. He also did something with expanding the acreage for the Grand Canyon and shutting down the ability to be able to mine rare metals, including uranium. So we shut down our capability to be able to mine stuff that can help us address energy issues. So, rabbit trail. Why isn't China concerned about this? Okay. Maybe you've seen this quote. George if I say this name right, Santayana. He was a Spanish-American philosopher, essayist, poet, and novelist, born in Spain, and raised and educated from age 8 in America. And he lived from 1863 to 1952. He says, those who cannot repeat the past are condemned to repeat it. But I saw this cartoon, and I like this. Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. Yet those who do study history are doomed to stand by helplessly while everyone else repeats it. So, or to say it more succinctly, those who understand history are condemned to watch other idiots repeat it. Well, what history are we repeating with climate change? I would venture to say it's more like fear, but let's take a look at what God says about these things. Genesis chapter 8, I'm sure Pastor Darren will get here eventually. Right, Pastor? Yeah, I love that Genesis series. Okay, and when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, he's talking to Noah here, and he's making a promise here. And Noah's made a sacrifice. And they said, and when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, and the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Well, yeah, we're all sinners. Okay, neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. I'll just emphasize that there. Shall not cease. So what he's saying is we're always going to have seasons. Climate change says it's going to suddenly become one thing, and we're either going to be a ball of ice or we're going to be a desert. We're either going to become like Mars or like Venus. The two extremes. No more seasons. But God has made a promise right here that we can trust. So who am I going to trust? God or the experts? Okay? So where they want to put us is here. Got to have a Venn diagram up there. You know, me and Camilla in our Venn diagrams. That's not a properly done Venn diagram, though, but the intent is to show us that we're surrounded by a lot of things to be afraid of. Okay? So what do we fear? E.T.? He's going to come and kill us because of climate change? The climate is going to do something really bad if we don't act, so fear everything. Solution: pay more taxes. Reduce our dependency on everything except the government. That's all they offer. When I first started looking at climate stuff back in the 70s, it was a coming ice age. And then I went into the military and didn't pay much attention to it. And then when I came out, it was, oh no, we're going into global warming. And I looked at it and said, these are the same people who said we were going to freeze. They don't know which direction we're going. Okay, so we know what they say. But I found this quote, and I like this. He who reads newspapers knows what's going on in the world. He who reads the Bible knows why. Okay, confession. I suspect most of us don't read newspapers anymore. But you get the intent. You see the news, but it's God's word that we can trust and count on. And it tells us why. Because he covers history from the very beginning, as Pastor Darren was talking about this morning, and he tells us when it happened at the end. Doesn't tell us everything in the middle there, but we can have confidence in what he says, the way things are going. We are not going to destroy the world. We cannot destroy the world. Okay. And Darren brought this one up, and I thought it fit better with us than the slide that I had originally put here. But he had just verse 11, I think, which I've highlighted here. And this is God talking to Job, kind of calibrating him on his position. And we occasionally need calibration too, and I think so maybe it's good to see what Job got calibrated on. Or who shut the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I made clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for its set bars and doors. And he's describing limits he's put on the earth. And he said, thus far shall you come and no further, and here shall your proud ways be stayed. He's talking about where the ocean stops. I don't know if you've seen it. They keep talking about how the ocean is going to rise and the coastal lands are going to be flooded. One of the places they say is Madagascar is going to be underwater by, I think it was 2010 or something. Madagascar has just built 4 new airports at sea level in their country, so they're not real concerned about the rising oceans. And I saw a picture here recently that showed in 1920 what the sea level was with the Statue of Liberty, and then what it is today. And of course the meme is that it's risen so far, and it's the same. Nothing has changed. Well, let's talk about our CO2 now. Okay, I like this diagram here. The Empire State Building is used as an example to display how much atmosphere we have. The nitrogen, and I can't remember what the tower is. I think it's in Shanghai or something like that. But it's showing 78% is nitrogen, 21% is oxygen, and the CO2 that we're worried about would be a paperclip laying on the ground. It is minuscule. But yet that's supposed to be the controlling valve that we're looking at. Alex Epstein, if you're not familiar with him, he's written a couple of books about I Love Fossil Fuels and Our Fossil Future, which are great books, by the way. I love them. But I like what he says here. Even if the climate impact of rising CO2 levels were a dire threat, the only justification of emergency powers versus considered legislation would be if the situation were temporary and solvable by our government. Neither is true. But this is what's true. This is from his website too. It shows, yes, from 1920 to now, CO2 has risen from 300 parts per million to almost 400, well, a little over 400 parts per million. But take a look at the right side there. Climate-related disaster deaths. These are people who have killed in tsunamis or hurricanes or tornadoes or anything that's a climate-related catastrophe. The death has decreased, yet the population has increased considerably. So while that's all going, while the population is going up, the deaths are going down. It's mitigated. We're able to take care of that stuff. Another guy this guy, Bjorn Lomborg, believes, yes, the climate is changing, it's getting warmer, and he thinks man is causing it, but he feels that the focus on trying to get rid of CO2 is wrong and that we can mitigate anything that it causes. So what's he saying here? We're not learning. Bjorn Lomborg says politicians hide behind climate change to duck responsibility for failures. Is that so true? And I love this picture here. It's like Bjorn Lomborg says, I've got your number. And Al Gore, the Goracle, says, I wonder what time lunch is. But these are the two people I love. Shock and awe. Well, I thought it was funny. Okay, back to work. United Nations High-Level Panel on Threats, Challenges, and Change. This is in 2004. They came up with this list of threats that they were concerned that the United Nations and the world needs to start addressing. Number 3, which is environmental degradation is improper stewardship in my mind, and can be dealt with, but probably not by politicians. But 4 through 10 is somebody not listening to God, because that's all dealing with how people relate with each other. So in Luke chapter 10, verse 27, and this is a recap, because it's said as its first place God says it is in Deuteronomy, if I remember correctly, but this is stated several times through the Bible. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. God values every single one of us. He values people. Okay? United Nations has what they call a Human Development Index. And the important part is the one I've highlighted below. A country scores higher level of HDI when the lifespan is higher, education level is higher, and the gross national income per capita is higher. So they're comparing things across the world as to how development is going, so we can kind of take a look at who's really fallen behind. Okay? So you can see by colors here, oops. We're a dark green, which means we're doing fairly good. Australia's doing better, and then there's some European countries that are doing better by their chart or whatever. But it's, I'm not sure how much we can take a look at that and value it. But I bring it up here because it's mentioned in another report I'm going to talk about in a minute. Changing to R.E. Smalley, he has his own view of what this is. Now, I'll tell you who R.E. Smalley is in a minute, but he has a list of his 10 favorite, or what he thinks are the things that we need to address, and his came out in 2005. And I think it's a more reasonable solution, but population is number 10. He has a problem with that. And Pastor Darren brought this up this morning. Fruitful and multiply. In Genesis chapter 1, 8, and 9, what's this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? 5 times he tells everybody, be fruitful and multiply. Okay, the first one is actually for animals. But he tells us, be fruitful and multiply. And then to the Hebrews, he says it several more times. And by principle, it's still applicable to us. And there's no place he says, be fruitful and multiply until you reach 500 million people. And there's some people who call us and say, we need to reduce our population to 500 million people. We're at 8 billion right now. We're slowed down. And they're worried that we're going to be 10 billion at some point, but it looks like it's going to be a lot further on because people are afraid to have kids now for some reason. I don't know. Should we be afraid of kids? I don't think so. Okay. Genesis 1, 26 through 28. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Actually, Pastor Darren covered a lot of this already. But verse 28, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion. God has given us a responsibility over the earth, and responsibility as stewards means we're still accountable to Him as how we treat this earth. So we do need to take care of it. But the way they're trying to tell us to take care of it isn't really doing much good. So let me talk about Richard Smalley, who he is. He was a co-discoverer, and got a Nobel Prize for this, of buckyballs. Who knows what buckyballs are? I can't believe Marty didn't raise his hand.
Yeah, I read about that.
No worries. Okay. Basically what it is it's something that they've done with carbon molecules, and they find that it creates a specific, unique structure that might have some chemical capabilities in the future. But he's named it after, or his team named it after, Buckminster Fuller. Now, who's Buckminster Fuller? Well, he created the Diamaxin car, which caused a sensation in the 30s. I think it's almost as good looking as the Tesla Cybertruck. It's a 3-wheel car. Anybody want to drive one of those? I think it's kind of cool. But what he's probably better known for is the geodesic dome. But look at what he says here. It is now highly feasible to take care of everybody on Earth at a higher standard of living than any have ever known. It no longer has to be you or me. Selfishness is unnecessary. War is obsolete. It is a matter of converting our energy, our high technology, from weaponry to livery. Well, all fine and well, but you're dealing with a bunch of sinners. So this part about selfishness, it is unnecessary, but you ain't going to solve it by just saying it's not necessary. Okay, but Richard Smalley, toward the latter part of the last 10 years of his life, and he died early from cancer, but he was going around making this speech about the 10 things that we need to address. And he was convinced that if we address energy, the next 4 are automatically taken care of. Wood, food, or water, food, environment, and poverty. That addresses all of those. And then we still would deal with terrorism and war, disease, education, democracy, and population. Of course, population, I think he's wrong on that. But I bring him up because this guy, Alan Pasternak, wrote a 27-page article, and the abstract is related. Remember I brought up the HDI, or the Human Development Index, before? He saw a correlation with electricity or energy and how people developed and how well they did in their country. And he says they do better if they can have 4,000 kilowatts, per capita of energy for people. How many kilowatts do you use in your house? Most of us don't know. Don't bother checking it. I checked, but I forgot. Okay, but I do know that the refrigerator takes about 800 watts, so it's almost 1,000 kilowatts. So we got a lot more energy going to our houses than just a refrigerator. This is a chart, and I tried to find a better chart, but the average American for energy, and this is per capita, which means that the energy being used, Americans, if you divide it by the population, it's 13,089 kilowatts per person. Now, not everybody's using that much, because industry uses a lot of it, but per capita, that's what we get. Canada uses a lot more, but they probably have to heat their homes more, so I don't know what that is. But Mexico, they're well under the 4,000 kilowatts. And that's per capita. So what the climate cultists are asking us to do, yes, Michael?
Is that per year or what?
Yeah, that's per year. Okay? So they want us to cut our energy use as individuals, but then we have groups like this. This is called the Giant Five. Some may call them even the Evil Five. But some say they're not just too big to fail, but they're too big to regulate. But what do they have that's using energy? Servers. They have server farms for cloud computing and for everything else they do. They use as much energy, electricity, as Ireland does, possibly even as much as Denmark, which uses a lot more. And the questionable thing is that why they don't, 4 of the 5 publish how much electricity they use. Amazon does not publish how much it uses. They speculate how much it uses based on what the other companies are. But it is huge, and they're increasing. What do they use it for? Well, for calculating. Electricity is the fuel of the information age. So if our information age is expanding, we're going to need more electricity for that, not less. And oh, by the way, Bitcoin is on the rise, whether we use it or not, but it uses a lot of computing power and needs a lot of electricity also. And oh, by the way, so does the marijuana growing industry. It's on the rise. Even the illegal ones. So making it legal in certain places hasn't gotten rid of the black market for pot. And that's a problem anyway. But why worry? Okay? He who counts the stars and calls them by their names is in no danger of forgetting his own children. God is not going to forget us. Okay? So I thought, you know what? This kind of reminds me of Judges, where everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. And so I did a quick search on that. But I like this very first verse, Exodus 15:26, saying, if you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. So he tells us, listen to me. I know how to take care of you. But of course, Judges, we have, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes, and it's a couple of times. But also in Proverbs, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. I like that verse. I'm going to have to make that a memory verse sometime. And then 21 verse 2, every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the heart. Okay? So let's talk about energy consumption. This is the diagram of total global energy consumption. You see the big charts there. Well, let's take a look at some of the differences here. Let's start with geo and biomass. What is geo? Geo is geothermal, and I like geothermal, but what is it? It's if you put pipes down deep enough, you can get hot temperatures to boil water. Most of these places are near volcanic activity because it's easier to get to. But you can do geothermal any place in the world if you drill down deep enough. The problem is drilling deep is expensive. Now, Iceland gets about 60% of their electricity from geothermal, but they're one big volcano. In fact, they go out there and they can cook their food in the ground. They just dig up a little hole and put it in there and let it cook because it can be so warm. Okay, what's biomass? Well, that's biomass. This is 1880s. A lady collecting cattle dung, cow pies, out in the pasture for fuel to heat their home or to cook their food. That was 1880. Here it is today. In India, they still do that. See those things on the wall? They've slapped that stuff up there to dry out. Those are handprints on there. I go, yeah, okay, no, thank you. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Now then, what about other? Let's take a look at other here. Other, we have what they call OTEC, which is ocean thermal energy conversion, and then we have tidal wave power. These aren't real big. They're possible, and they're being done in some places, but it's expensive, okay? But it's being worked on, so those are options. Okay, the big one is wind and solar, all right? And they say wind and solar are free, but harvesting it is expensive. I think this is the best use of wind and solar. And anybody who's dried their clothes this way knows it doesn't, you can't just put it out there and it's done. It takes a while, and if it's raining or snowing, the wind's not blowing or it's overcast, it takes a lot longer. So, trying to make your whole economy work off of that. All right. So, total energy consumption. Well, we want to get rid of oil, want to get rid of gas or coal and gas. They don't like hydro. We're shutting down dams all over the place because we want to get the salmon down the runs or up the runs or whatever. And they don't like nuclear for some reason. So what's that leave us with? Geo, biomass, wind, solar, other. If our energy needs are going up, how's that going to fix us? You can almost not see those circles. Okay, I'm going to skip this chart, but nuclear, one of the big advantages of that is sometimes being dense is a virtue. Because uranium's high energy density makes nuclear power more efficient than other clean energy sources. One other thing that's cool is it's not just energy dense and with its power, it takes less land than is required by wind and solar devices. Okay? This is an example here, and I read an article yesterday, I think it was, that if we wanted to convert to windmills for the entire country, we would have to cover a landmass twice the size of California to be able to do that. That's a lot of land. And there's a lot of people who don't like living next to these things because you can hear a constant whine and that irritating, But there's a sound that you can't hear, because it's a deep frequency stuff, that you can feel. And it's 24 hours, or it's whenever the wind is blowing, you get that. They put some of them off on the coast, and they're driving some of the whales nuts, and they're killing themselves. But the environmentalists really aren't caring about that. My big problem with windmills is they're bird blenders. They kill a lot of birds. And I've had people tell me, well, cats kill more birds than windmills do. And I said, I'd like to see the cat that kills a bald eagle. That doesn't happen that often. It's killing the raptors, which are on the higher level of the food chain, than the little sparrows that the cats are going for. Okay, cats can go for robins too, but they're not killing the big birds. Okay? Same with solar cells. They take a lot of land too. Now then, deaths per energy source. I'll throw this up here. Coal has the highest, primarily because of the emissions of the coal. By the way, biomass, those cow dung chips, they have a lot of fumes too that don't do good for people's lungs. So all this stuff here, nuclear is the safest, even over hydro. Of all the power it's produced, it's had less deaths. What about Chernobyl? Well, Russia had made a lot of mistakes with that one. What about Fukushima? Nobody was killed by the accident that happened with the power plant. It was all tsunami or panic from what happened with the power plant. But nobody was actually killed by Fukushima. And 3 Mile Island, nobody was killed. It was all contained. Okay? Skip that one. So, but talking about fear, who wants us to fear? Who's the liar? But I like this quote here. Ponder how valuable your soul must be for Satan to tirelessly pursue it and the king to lay down his own life for it. I like that part. And then here's an admonition from Charles Spurgeon that I like. Beware of no man more than yourself. We carry our worst enemies within us. So, what's that fit with this? Well, fear. I think we need to go to God with our fear and let Him take care of it. And with that, my last slide is this one. Fear has 2 meanings. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. So, with God, we can take care of this. The end. Let's go ahead and close in prayer. Holy God, we thank you for taking care of us. We thank you that you have the provisions and so much you've provided us with and so many blessings you've given us, and we ignore them or forget them. Help remind us and help us remind others. Help us be able to share that message that you want to give to everybody of who and what your Son is and what He did for us on that cross. We thank you for the blessing you bestowed upon us. In His holy and precious name we pray. Amen.